Well, we want to thank you all for being here. We want to thank Club Giroux. We have a long history with Club Giroux, going back at least a decade, working with them and having our events here. I also want to thank Peggy Pace, who's our board chair, who is a member here and who facilitated this meeting today. On behalf of my team, Samantha Scory and Ivana Garcia, who you met at the registration table, and Samantha's working behind the scenes and also on Zoom. And hello, everyone on Zoom watching. On behalf of my team, I want to thank all of you for being here in person and also for being members of the World Affairs Council and for supporting our programming. Last year, we had a really tough year, as did a lot of for-profits and nonprofits, but you all came through. You stuck with us, and that really means a lot. Whether it was posting items and reposting on social media, watching our Instagram stories, you came through and you supported the World Affairs Council, and that really means a lot to us. And please give yourselves a round of applause for supporting this nonprofit organization. I also want to recognize we have board members here. If you could, Julie, Andrea, Ambassador. Is there anyone I'm missing? And Sarah, sorry, Sarah, who runs our Young Professionals Committee. Thank you all for being here and also supporting the council. If you're interested in participating in more depth with the World Affairs Council, please talk to them as far as committees or becoming a board member. Now, let me ask you a quick question. How many of us have been to or lived in over 20 cities around the world, or other than Joanne Cummins? How many of you have traveled to dozens of other places? Colombia, for example, Jamaica. Well, you're Colombian.
She and my wife can pass.
Okay. These two gentlemen have, and they have also served our country as foreign service officers, ambassadors, serving the U.S. of A. So without further ado, I want them to have the floor. They'll be here around a little afterwards to also answer any questions. We will have questions from the end at the 50-minute mark. Since we started a little bit late, we will carry it on to about 7 or so, depending on where the conversations go. But I first want to introduce Philip Roskamp. These are very short bios. Some of you have already seen the bios. I don't want to run through all of them, but they have very impressive bios. So Philip is a career public diplomacy officer with the State Department. As of next month, he is going to be the Council of Public Affairs at the U.S. Embassy in Japan. He has served as Counselor of Public Affairs at the Embassy in Manila, which you just came from there a few weeks ago. He's also served in Australia, New Zealand, India, Jakarta, Senegal, he has supported U.S. government responses to several natural disasters, including the Fukushima disaster, the Nepal earthquake, and the devastating earthquake in Haiti years ago. You'll remember that, killed hundreds of thousands. He's a native of San Antonian, went to Churchill High School. The Chargers, right? I didn't know that. He is married to Kaho, who's right here. They have 3 kids. He's a product of UT Law and also Georgetown University. And his family's here. His wife, as I mentioned, and his mother, who started this and gave me a call one day and said, how would you like to have Philip Roskamp speak to the World Affairs Council? What better way than to start our first in-person event than after his wife? What a fine young man and representative of our country. So thank you for reaching out and for allowing the motion to start to make this happen.
I did dress myself tonight.
Ambassador Luis Moreno, he was confirmed by the Senate in 2014 as ambassador to Jamaica. He has served in a variety of distinguished posts in Spain, in Iraq, in Israel, Mexico. He has served as the Deputy Chief of Mission in Haiti and as the Narcotics Affairs Director in Bogota, Colombia. In 1995, he was assigned to the U.S. Embassy in Panama. In 1993, he was assigned to Prince of Haiti as a refugee coordinator, where he repatriated tens of thousands of Haitians. After the UN Convention in 1994, Ambassador Moreno became his first political military officer. He was a product of Fordham University and College, Spanish, French, and Haitian Creole. He is joined today by his wife, Lori. He's also, I don't know if I mentioned it, he also served on the Board of Council Board of Trustees. The floor is all yours. Let's give him a big Texas welcome.
Thank you, Morgan, and hope this volume is we all have very special stories about why we joined the country, why we do the things we do. For instance, I joined after the embassy. That was kind of a key thing. That's how old it was. But I don't want to get into that. First, you have a great story here. You're a local boy named Good. That made you great. So, can you tell us a little bit about growing up in San Antonian? How you got to
Yeah, thank you very much, Ambassador. First, just a big thanks to the World Affairs Council. It sort of brings me back full circle. When I was in high school, Churchill High School, I got a scholarship from the World Affairs Council for college. It wasn't tons of money, but it was it helped Ambassador Ann Armstrong, I think, was there on the night that I got it. And that's a big deal to meet an ambassador. I will say, after I joined the foreign service, I reached out to the World Affairs Council a couple of times to say, hey, I'm in the foreign service, I'm from San Antonio, let's do something. And they were like, well, you're not an ambassador, call us. So, fast forward, not an ambassador yet, but Arden was kind enough to have me tell a little bit about the story. So it's fantastic to be here. Yes, I am from San Antonio. I went to Churchill, grew up in Bitters and Blanco Road. So I'm a public high school kid from a middle income family, not a blue blood, representing America overseas. Sort of how, thanks to my mom, who was supportive of a single mom throughout, and thanks to my wife, who kept me on the straight and narrow my adult years. But I think what really kindled my interest was I did debate. I was a debate geek. We were talking about Churchill and the debate geeks. We hung out in like a portable building outside of the main building, and I did cross-examination debate, and I did extemporaneous speaking, and we would go on tournaments. The program that I went at Churchill was a really strong program. Our high school, arch rivals, strong program. Lee High School, another strong program. Sorry if you were for me. I don't know if it's called the. But we would go all over the country and do these tournaments. And we go to Emory University in Atlanta, we go to Northwestern in Chicago, and we go to California. I was a major nerd in my summers. I went to debate camp at the University of Iowa and American University in DC. And that was my thing. And so from age 16, 17, 18, I was just immersed in this world of all these things happening outside of San Antonio. And when I decided to go to college, I studied international relations, and which prepares you to do nothing. It makes you a good pub trivia partner, but it doesn't prepare you to do anything else. And so, so that's how I got interested in this stuff. As I was getting to know the ambassador, the first time we met was in Starbucks. But like his case in the Iranian Revolution, my path to the foreign service went through UT Law School. As odd as it might sound, I went sort of raised, you're going to be an attorney, went to law school, and so I graduated from Georgetown and went and worked in Japan for 2 years. I had no better idea, but I remember you're going to be an attorney, so I did indeed go to law school and hated it. Oh, it's terrible. If you've never been pushed to law school, it is the worst thing you can ever suffer. except for working a congressional delegation overseas. Anyway. But so I was in law school when 9/11 happened, and I had some friends on the international law journal with me, and they had signed up for the Foreign Service exam. For us, it's just an exam. You don't have to show proof of blood or give your DNA or anything like that. It's just a test. It's a free test. And anybody can take the test. You don't need college degree to take the test. So I had some friends who had signed up, and I went on and talked to my wife, and she convinced me to sign up for it. And I signed up, and then 9/11 happened. And I mean, it happened on the day that I had class. And it's one of those, where were you? Challenge exploded. Where were you when 9/11 happened? And my wife called and she said, turn on the TV. You're not going to believe it. Turn on the TV. And it was right literally moments before the Twin Towers fell down. So they hit it, smoke was coming up, and then it collapsed. And literally, let's say 3 or 4 weeks later, I was sitting for the Foreign Service exam in on a campus in Austin, and we passed the written, and then we took an oral exam. And my plan going to law school was to work with my best friend from high school, who was a criminal defense attorney. So when I showed up in Austin, day one, it was to learn criminal defense. And that's how I charted my path until I took the exam. I passed the written, and then the oral was in a nondescript federal building in Dallas. I thought I was going to be tortured, but there was no torture involved. And I passed the oral, and so I had this fork in the road. Do I continue on this path of criminal defense with my best friend in a great city, Austin's a great city, who doesn't love it, but or do I do something for public service? And it just seemed like there was a time in America where we needed people serving overseas and telling the American story, but not just listening to other people's stories. And faced with the choice of an Austin courtroom for the rest of my life, or these amazing places I never had a chance to visit as a kid. We chose the latter. Here we are 18 years later, so I started January 2003 with an oath to the Constitution, not to the president, but to you as Americans, the Constitution. And here we are, 18 years on, but it could have been very different. But that generation, it started in 02, it started in 03. That 9/11 experience is extremely informative for us because we all chose to serve after the crisis that we didn't know.
Yeah, and then people in the military. Army mentioned all the country. It's really fabulous. And you had the family. Right? Very connection with Israel. How is it? Tell us about how you jump and explain about the pros and cons of traveling with the family, living around the world.
So here I am from San Antonio, and I know maybe like 10 words in Spanish. I enough that I can get in trouble with Taco Bell. But so for some reason when I was a kid, I was interested in Japan. And I don't know why, but I remember in 3rd grade I had to do a presentation, and we had to pick a country in the world, and I picked Japan. And I remember going to college and picked foreign language, and I picked Japanese. It was so hard. So bad at it. In Georgetown, it was every day, and it was we started out with intensive language, and it met at like 8:30 in the morning. And I barely went to class that first year, sorry, Mark. But the professor, you have to, before the School of Foreign Service was, it's modeled after State Department. So you take a foreign language exam to graduate from college. If you don't get the requisite score, you don't graduate. So my teacher pulled me aside one day. She was like, "What's kind of stuff? You're not very good. You need to do something different. You need to go to Japan to study, or you're not going to graduate." Begrudgingly dragging my feet, I went up to the summer program in Japan after myself. I love it. I've never lived in another country. I've never visited another country. I got to use the broken Japanese that I had. I had an amazing homestay there. And as soon as I got back, I had to walk. Even overseas. And so after the summer, then the semester in Tokyo, then the 2 years in Kumamoto City Hall, our sister city, Kumamoto, Japan. As an aside, there's a woman in the crowd who I'd heard of for years, but never met, Beth Costello, who works for the city, has represented us in a sister city relationship. And one of my best friends from Kumamoto, Japan, I sung her praises for years. And so But so, 2 years in the Corona City Hall, I mean, being the only 6 foot tall guy in the Japanese City Hall was kind of interesting. And then I joined the Foreign Service, my second tour was in I'll say, it was interesting too, interesting, yes. And I'll say that, we had 5 treaty relationships in the United States and Asia. Thailand, Korea, Japan, Australia, the Philippines. And it's quite something to work for an alliance. So when we use the word ally, so it's not my ally this, my ally that, but an alliance is actually something created by a leader. And an alliance says, that I'm going to put my neck on the line to protect you or to save you, in a time of crisis. So it's quite meaningful to have an ally. Japan is one of our 5 allies. So being able to work for an allied relationship is really important.
What about your lifestyle? There's pros and cons. You've got your family, you've got kids, you've got the kids in school, just the logistics of which just all the adjustments and heartache and all the good stuff. So our first tour was in Dakar, Senegal. So growing up in Texas, I never thought I was going to live in Africa. We had money to travel to Africa. It was never on my radar. Never stuck to Africa. It just wasn't what I was thinking about. And you have some say so in your assignments in the Foreign Service. And so we did hiring on Senegal. We met them in French and showed up in Senegal. When we first started as a government employee, you get paid very little, and you get very little annual leave. So within the first 6 months or so, one of my best friends from college said, I want you to come be the best man in my life. I couldn't go because I had no leave. We accrue leave at 4 hours of pay period when you're an entry-level government employee in the Foreign Service. And so quite a big thing.
And so I had to tell my friend Bill, I can't be in your way. That's the first sort of, this is what an overseas career means. My cousin quit. I couldn't be in Israel. I'm serving overseas. And so you start to feel like you can do these amazing things serving the U.S. overseas, but friends and family are what hurts the most. And so fast forward to having kids, we can introduce our kids to the most amazing things. The most incredible people. That, when we went from Jakarta, Indonesia to Mumbai, India, the eldest was, 10 years old or so. And when we got to Mumbai, for the first couple of weeks, every night, she went to bed looking at her yearbook from Jakarta and missing her friends. And we just thought, oh, we're going to complete therapy later. So on the one hand, our kids get to have these incredible experiences, see these amazing things, and meet incredible people. It's tough because people are not going to move them in private plants. When you have similar experiences, how do you want to depend some roots and some connection? We have one country in the world that we can serve with family, and that is Tokyo, Japan. We get to go there next because there ain't no embassy in San Antonio. So we get to go be with our in-laws, and we try to raise our kids in a bilingual household. Maybe some of you have similar experience. That's tough, especially when it's Japanese. So they'll be able to speak for years on the street with their family. So we're really fortunate that we have this opportunity to get to a place in the world where we can do this.
They're amazing. And you're a public affairs officer. Different columns of state politics. And for me, the coolest thing is public affairs. Because you have to be, you're speaking, you're representing the United States, you're explaining things, you're dealing with the press, all these things. And now you're really going up the chain here. So tell us, what is a day in the life of being a public affairs?
So, and I forgot to say at the beginning, I'm supposed to give a disclaimer. I'm not representing the State Department. I just happen to work there. I don't represent anyone currently at the State Department who works in the State Department in the past or will in the future or anything related to the State Department. So there you go, State Department. So when you're overseas at an embassy, particularly one with time difference, like you serve in Asia. So we divide the world into 68 different geographic regions, and one of them is East Asia Pacific. And when you wake up in the morning in Manila or Tokyo or Jakarta, it's evening. We've had a full day of business in Washington. So the first hour at least is spent putting out the Washington files. So when you're in the field, you don't like hearing from Washington. You want Washington to hear from you. But it doesn't always work that way. So you spend the first part of the morning figuring out what's happening. And in an embassy is like the alphabet soup of the federal government. You know, there's Department of Defense is there, the Department of Justice might be there, FBI might be there, Homeland Security might be there. You know, if you're in Tokyo, NASA has a rep there. Maybe Department of Transportation, Treasury. I mean, you go through anything you can find on the tour of Washington D.C. They exist in some of these embassies. And so a big part of what we do is trying to coordinate right across the interagency. And although we're all executive agencies and work for the same president, you know, doesn't necessarily mean all of our interests align at the same time. The front row, Joanne Cummings, is our vice ambassador, for lack of a better term, in Micronesia, knows about wrangling the interagency. Doing public affairs, maybe perhaps under the previous administration, you always checked Twitter. Because Twitter policy was made by Twitter, and you were just like, what do you say anything about the Philippines today? and so the once you got through the Twitter check, then it was all good, and you check the local press, and you go through the day. But a really big part of what we do is not only engaging foreign audiences, but trying to corral our own government so that we're all aligned to achieve the mission. You were an ambassador. You know this better. It's a scrum. I mean, it's no joke scrum, because again, we also want the same ultimate objective, but we all have different ideas about the ways to get the tactics.
You know, you mentioned something about different administrations. Since you've opened have you know, I came in a lot of ways. So number of Bushes. So, is there a market difference in the way things happen when administrations change? You have to really start doing business a different way. I mentioned foreign policy, but put it in the front group. I was a member of 6 long months. That by putting it, it's unbelievable. There's usually a process to go through. That process. But normally, between Bush, Obama, explain a little bit about what goes on and what the process is.
Well, I started in Bush, right, and then Obama was elected, and then I think my family almost all fainted. And then I worked 8 years under Obama, and then worked under Trump, and now under Biden. And so I made that point earlier on about we take an oath to the Constitution, not to the president. So it really doesn't matter. Right? At the end of the day, I'm serving the American people, and I'm serving the Constitution. If I'm asked to do something in contradiction of that, it's a personal choice. That said, the State Department is an executive agency. You don't agree with the boss, leave. It's not that simple. I'm not trying to make light of it, but we're not indentured servants. You're not there, because you're forced to be there. If you feel like you can't execute a policy, or maybe executing foreign policy isn't for you. And everybody has to make that choice. There are some policies that will change every administration. I mean, you look at, when Trump ran for president, he said, there are these things I'm going to do. He came to the office and he said, I'm going to pull out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I'm going to leave the Paris Climate Accord, and did those things. And those are, whatever opinion you want about whether those things are good or bad, but we as an institution have to follow those things, because that's the American people elected, and that's the direction that we want to be taken. Abortion-related funding, whether you sit on that, whether or not U.S. foreign assistance can go towards family planning activities, that generally changes between Democrats and Republicans. But it's not a question of where you sit on it, that's just a policy between these. But honestly, there are some key things about being an American that are not administration specific. We generally don't want one country to be a global hegemon. We certainly don't want that country to be China right now. And whether or not you're Republican or Democrat, we don't want China to be writing the rules of the road, much like we didn't want the Soviet Union to be writing the rules of the road. So that sort of view on how you want international order to exist is not party specific. We want market access for U.S. companies, whether or not you're Obama, Biden, Trump, or Bush. So that market access in an open marketplace. We believe the market should decide, not the government. That's not administration specific. Our democratic values and human rights, not administration specific. There might be different points of emphasis on different administrations, but I think there are like 3 or 4 things that really You know, the way the economy should run, the way no country should run the globe, and exert coercion over other nations and individual freedoms. Since I started in 2003 and until today, we stood for those same things. And so, you know, the way the message might be conveyed via Twitter or action memo is a little bit different, but there's some core things about being American that set us apart. I don't know if you feel.
No, absolutely. It's very helpful to say. I'm gonna give you like a good practice exercise. Yeah. You know, when Joe Biden became president, he started this initiative, you know, middle class relevance to foreign policy. It's a really good question. So, how can the foreign service, foreign policy, and overseas stuff, you know, be relevant to like ordinary people?
It's a great question. So DOD is super smart, the Department of Defense. Sorry to use acronyms, Department of Defense. You know, in the national security space, and we as diplomats, we're working for national security. We're not there to just deliver eloquent speeches or haikus or whatever it might be. If we're working for national security, we just don't have guns like the Department of Defense does. We don't have some tools that other national security agencies have, but we're working for the national security. Part of the defense is a lot easier because you can see guns and tanks and ships, and you can see bases. And part of defense does a great job of engaging with the Hill. And if you remember from your government courses back in high school, Congress has the power of the purse. They decide the budget. And so the Department of Defense knows, like, I gotta have to be good friends with Congress. The State Department is absolutely different in that for us to engage with the Hill, we have to be summoned to the Hill, usually not for a good reason. There's an office that we have to go to engage with the Hill. And so we have some State Department folks who work on the Hill, but a much smaller number than the Department of Defense. And so we do a really bad job of telling our story about the value we bring to the American public, in large part because our focus is talking to the foreign public. In fact, there's an act called the Smith-Mundt Act that goes back to the 40s to prevent the government from engaging in propaganda, which forbids the State Department from using our funding on the American people. So we do, you know, we have a say about the spokesperson, he talks to the American people, but we're overseas, we can read the foreign audiences. And so it's just very long way of saying, we don't talk to Americans about what we do. But a perfect example, when I was in Mumbai, something we did that you can really put in economic terms is the Indian film industry, Bollywood, does a big film showcase of Bollywood, IFA, the IFA Festival in different cities around the world, and they've never come to the United States. They picked Toronto, lots of Indians in Canada, and picked all these other places in the world. We got them to pick a city in Florida. And it brought over $30 million into the Tampa Bay St. Petersburg economy because we made that happen there at the consulate in Mumbai. And so, so the State Department has a big role in trade investment, advocating for U.S. companies. If you've ever lost your passport overseas, who are you going to call? And places like Mexico, you still in Monterey, when spring breakers get jailed, who are you going to call? So there are American citizens and services that we provide. And we're the direct liaison with the host government on a whole variety of issues. And so we got to figure out a better way about how to tell that story.
I think that's a major weakness. That addressing, making it relevant to American people. But the only time I've been acting ambassador in 4 or 5 different countries, and the only time I spoke to American press was because of something bad. Some disaster, some criminal, some kind of things. Never good news.
Yes, you know, to make the front page of like New York Times or LA Times, it's never going to be a good news story. It's going to be like somebody was killed in the country, a disaster happened in the country, and so when the national press comes calling,
Having been on the front page of the New York Times 3 or 4 times, I can assure you.
yes.
You know, the State Department has different things. You mentioned about how DOD has bases and weapons system, but the State Department does have certain options. I mean, you have what you call your regional bureaus that we talked about that divide countries by, you know, locality and continents and whatever. But you also have something called functional. Functional bureaus are things that you actually get to do stuff. Like international narcotics and law enforcement. I spent a career dealing with that difference. You know, you get that control massive parties. And as a number officer, Department of Administrators, General, so on and so forth, population, refugee, and migration. You get to build refugee camps. You get to help people. Ryan and I, we're the political military group. We work as advisors. It's kind of like she won Plumbing Officer of the Year at that. I was the head of military officers in Iraq. And we get to be with the commanding generals and advise them. General, I don't think that's such a hard idea. You know, once I did that, the guy threw me out of the room. But in Iraq, we never listen to you. So you do have options in the State Department for functionality. You have to take your expertise once you do it. Another you're reading it down. You know, that's why PD is kind of it's the oldest. Let me ask you something that's really relevant to all of us. And that's COVID. And we're going to Japan. The Olympics are endangered. And the percentage of people vaccinated in Japan is pretty low. Can you talk about how COVID has how COVID has affected embassies and doing this work overseas? What kind of impact?
Major impact. So we were in Manila for the past 3 years, 2018, 2021, just came back, proud Philippine American crowd. And, you know, so Manila had direct flights from Wuhan, and there were lots of travelers coming. So we started hearing about the virus in January and February, and then in March 2020, the Philippine government nationwide implemented the quarantine, basically lockdown. And so for about 8 to 10 weeks, we were locked into our house. And everybody was like, it's nothing to do with the embassy. This is a Philippine government rule. Every family got one quarantine pass. And it said on it, you know, good for one person, and you can go out basically get medicine, you can go out to get food. You can use it for work if your place of business was open, but 8 to 10 weeks of lockdown. And that was enforced by people with long guns on the street. And if you violated, you were arrested. And it was, you know, it was crazy. We were lucky that we were a single family home and had a very, very small yard. So the routine every 5 p.m. to 6 p.m., our 9-year-old and I kicked the soccer ball. Just like straight back and forth. We went for you know, over 2 months, but at least we could get outside and get some air. There were other embassy staff who were in apartment buildings who had no such luxury. And some of those buildings, in fact, passed rules that said you can't even take your pets out for a walk. They need to do their business inside. It was crazy. And it was not an embassy rule. This was a Philippines rule. You know, every country was doing these things in a different way. So it's not a criticism of the Philippine response, but it's just how it was there. And once, after about 10 weeks, it started to open up a little bit. But everywhere you went, you had to wear a mask, and you had to wear a shield. You had to wear both. So, I mean, imagine, you don't like tropical weather. Imagine, you know, a mask and a shield everywhere you go, you know, and the country was changed so much because so many folks that are paid on a daily basis and paid by cash. The restaurants are closed down, the construction sites are closed down. You know, people just couldn't get any income. So slowly, the embassy, the American officers at the embassy really started coming back, and we started doing everything via Zoom. And you know, the way it works in all of embassies and concepts overseas is that most of the staff in those offices are host country nationals or local staff. And that's the way it is in all of our embassies and concepts overseas. They know everybody in the country. They become institutional knowledge. They will know the countries much better than we ever will. They're really a key ingredient to our success. But when we're in these capital cities, the living is expensive, it's populated, it's super crowded. Life is much tougher when you live in the Jakarta suburbs than it is when you're a diplomat serving in Jakarta. We don't have to take public transportation. We either have our own car or an embassy car, but our staff like in Manila, they either take a jeepney, which is to say like if you took a jeep and pulled it literally and put about 20 people in it, that's a jeepney. Commuted by a jeepney or by train or by bus. And in a time of COVID, you know, to tell staff you got to jump into one of these things, come into work, it was a non-starter. So the State Department came out with some general guidance about how you deal with stuff overseas. Each individual post was sort of left to determine what their staffing levels would be. But I went months. I managed a team of 42 people. I went months without seeing anyone. And you just do it all on Zoom. Public affairs, a big part of what we do, big public engagements. We haven't done a in-person public engagement in a year and a half. But no, no one else has either in the Philippines, but it dramatically effectively. We work government to government meetings, so happen via Zoom. When we finally were able to start doing some small things, we saw someone in person, it's like, oh my God, I live in my family. But so that's how it kind of affected the day-to-day. And the State Department offered vaccines to all of its staff overseas. It's not mandatory, it's just by choice. I mean, a place like the Philippines, when people clamor, for vaccines because, COVID was bad. And so we made the choice to get it. The local staff got it. And we're providing as a U.S. government through COVAX. I don't know if you're familiar with the COVAX facility, but it's a global fund to make the vaccines available. We're the largest donor to COVAX. We're proud of those vaccines are getting to East Asia Pacific as well as some direct donations. U.S. vaccines are the best vaccines in the world. We'd much rather have people take them, Sinovac or Sputnik, because they work better. But these other guys are using vaccines to this political leverage as well. And so we'd much rather have them take Pfizer, Moreno, Johnson & Johnson than whatever the Chinese are going to offer because it's fine print again.
But, we also pay a heavy price. Why they lost a whole bunch of globally first. And if you look at Afghanistan, half the American staff. So it also affected if you lost your passport, visa services. Visa services not to be pushed back.
Not to make a joke, I just chuckled with it. I think that the consular section in embassy serves American citizens who, if you give birth abroad as an American citizen, you get a birth certificate overseas, you need your passport. But for foreign citizens, those are visas. Everything from students to people who want to immigrate to the States, whatever it might be. And those services were curtailed, but the staffing was curtailed. And one of the visa categories, at least in Manila, we only started on a smaller basis for fiance visas. We didn't know you can apply for a visa for fiance. I will say we had a very robust social media engagement campaign, especially during COVID. That's how we talk to people on Facebook and Twitter. Our most active constituency, or our most active followers, were fiance visa applicants who every day were like, when are you going to restart? When are you going to restart? And they would share pictures of them and their fiance. You can't break love. You can't.
The old page.
The K visas. I'm not trying to fight it, but from the outside, the perspective was, why aren't all of you just doing visas? And the reality is only a small number of people in an embassy do visas. We all do these other things as well. But anyway, it affected visas incredibly, especially for the fiance.
I guess when I came to foreign service, our first tour we went over visas. Is that the same?
Yeah, so when you come in, you're actually considered an untenured officer, like an untenured professor. And so the State Department has about 4 or 5 years to decide if you're the right fit or not. Right? And then during those first 2 tours, you don't really pick when you go. Someone picks for you, and at least one of those 2 tours has to be a consular tour. And that means you're either identifying dead bodies, American guys overseas, you got to identify them. Let's be honest, I only do a couple times someone gets arrested. And they're visited in jail. So if you ever get arrested, we'll visit you.
But we can't get you out.
We can't get you out.
We can give you a list of lawyers.
That's right. People ask us to get it out, but we can't. And then we do, all this visa stuff. Visa or consular services, that's a particular career track in the foreign service, and some people love that. It is the 5 different career tracks that we have.
What do you mention?
Political, economic, in management, basically the facilities, the people, the budget, and consular and public diplomacy. Consular is really the one that has the most direct impact on somebody's life. Because if somebody gets a visa to go study, somebody gets a visa to go to a job, you have changed their life trajectory. So, customer service all day, every day, it can be hard work. That's really what changed people's lives as consular has.
Get to know the people better than anyone else. My first tour was second part of the tour was I was a police advisor from the first year and a half. I didn't want to leave. Just meet so many people and publish the ball on. I'll try to say that in their consular services, really important. And you're often the first face of the American method. Let me wrap up with that, with something that I'm sure that I know for a fact. That what advice would you give to a young person who is interested in a career in services? What should they study? What should they look for? Is it a good idea? Is it a worthwhile idea? Just your perspective on the foreign service in general.
Well, for me personally, serving foreign service has been a perfect fit. I think in America we don't have a draft. We don't have a public service thing that everybody has to do, and so I think working for your community and working for your nation is incredibly important. To know what you're doing. Enables you to see things that you wouldn't ever see otherwise. Enables you to change people's lives. And so for me, that public service component is incredibly important, incredibly fulfilling. So I think if you're interested in something like that, foreign service is a great way to do it. We were, as I said early on in the embassy, we really want several foreign agencies involved overseas. So the State Department, U.S. Agency for International Development, that's the foreign assistance branch of the U.S. government. So folks who have backgrounds in demography or gender, the development studies, USAID is a great fit. You've got the Foreign Agricultural Service, is trying to get U.S. agricultural products into foreign markets, making sure that foreign products come into U.S. markets, meet phytosanitary standards. Foreign Commercial Service, which works with U.S. companies to get market access to foreign markets and also to bring in foreign direct investment. There's the entire intelligence community, into that. We're doing some amazing stuff. And Department of Defense, active duty civilian. So there are tons of routes to get to, routes you can take to get to overseas work. I think this one has been a perfect fit for me. But if it wasn't, I also could quit. Like I said, I could have done 5, 7, 10 years and tried something else. So just to say, if anyone's looking for a career overseas, there are lots of different paths to get there. If you want to do it for 3 years, I had people in my own class who only did it for about 5 weeks, and their spouse got cold feet. I got here, maybe they just did it like 2 tours and they decided, you know what, life back in Nevada is better than life. That's Chad, something like that.
That's a generation.
Yes,
It is. When we joined, I mean, you're a lifer. Let's take that. You signed up for the whole $9. And, you have to apply this 10 out of like whatever it's called. But it really works. And I noticed as I progressed, like I said, 4 times. So I talked to every young officer of the post, and it changed. It was like some people would say from the beginning, what you said, I'm going to do a couple of years, and if I like it, I'll stay. And it looks good on the resume. So there's a lot of that.
And when you're a U.S. diplomat serving overseas, you can meet whoever you want, from the president on down. I mean, there's some rank that it's related to meeting the president, but CEOs of companies, heads of NGOs, the young technopreneurs, the movers and shakers, all you have to do is pick up the phone. I work at the SMC, but just grab a coffee, and you can meet anybody and get inspired all the time.
And inspire people.
And I think this will be the last thought on this idea of service is, not sounding too alarmist, but I do kind of, we're in a great hour competition. When I joined in 2003, our adversary was a non-state actor, that's terrorism. There are state sponsors of terror, but by and large, in 2003 when I joined, there wasn't anybody really rooting for the terrorists. And they weren't really backed by a clear, Duran kind of did a discussion about state-sponsored terrorism, but in states, fast forward in China was not exporting an ideology back in 2003. Fast forward to 2021, and China is exporting an ideology. It's trying to change the rules of the road to suit China's view of the world rather than a democratic, rules-based view of the world. And I think there's never been a more important time to fight that battle right now, because one of the real reasons why foreign affairs is important to people here is because if you war what happens overseas, if you don't work on what happens overseas, it's going to affect what happens on Main Street as well. China gets to write the rules of the road on 5G networks. And where do you think all that data goes? Right? If China gets to write the rules of the road at the UN and all these international bodies, they're written in ways that benefit a billion people on the other side of the road. not the 330 million living in America, or the other democratic nations who subscribe to our worldview. So it really is a competition for ideas and values right now, and will be manifested in actual power. So it's an important time, I think, to realize that.
Absolutely. I spent a lot of time in Latin America, competing with Chinese. We don't have the same rules, and they are just buying up all sorts of stuff. I mean, I once made a joke. I did my public affairs office. So some guy said, well, what do you mean? What's the difference? And so because of the American company, he doesn't bring a suitcase full of cash like his Chinese counterparts do. I mean, I was joking, but not really all that much. That's what we're up against. It's a double standard that we have. We now have something called Alpha Diplomats. Chinese diplomats, we call it Alpha Wolves. Not they, guys who saw in the Caribbean, they were aggressive and respect.
Well, and you can imagine how they dealt with the January 6th insurrection. That we were talking about a battle for ideas, between democracy and non-democracy. If you're on the non-democracy side, you're actively exporting a worldview that's anti-democratic. How do you think you would use the insurrection? Right? All over the papers, all over the Chinese government social media accounts. They're like, that's what you want? Like, you want people storming the Capitol? I mean, what happens here affects how the world sees us, which will boomerang effect.
Yeah, so we and the Russians, of course, saying that the people have been arrested for political prisoners. It's just a constant battle. You've got public opponents on front of it. I think we'll wrap it up. And any questions that anyone has? We have 10 minutes for questions. Sir.
When you retire and you decide what a right your memoirs, you're restricted by the State Department. Do they have to?
Yes, anything we write, whether on semi-retired because I'm in a special work. Now that we're going to have.
If you write your memoirs, you have to see.
Yes, absolutely. If you write a fiction, if you write, a story about going to Mars, you've got to clear it with the State Department. And if you don't, lose your clearance. Lose your pension. Or you could lose whatever.
Step is FBI got to go to memoirs. CIA sued him and he planted on his arms. It was the best selling book. I don't know if you've heard of Frank's stuff.
Of course, he was an agent. Yeah, very well.
Probably in no danger of writing a bestseller, but you have to get through. It's the only reason, I would only be able to write an interesting book based on my State Department experiences, and the State Department kind of owns those experiences, and so you have to do a pre-publication review.
I mean, I spend a lot of time now doing like media and academic panels. I did 2 tours in Haiti, and I did a couple of tours in Colombia. So the thing with the assassination of the Haitian president, supposedly by Colombian mercenaries. So I've talked my head off for the past week and 10 days. So that we really cannot censor me telling the Sunday Times of London that I didn't believe the government's account of the killing of the president of Haiti, or that Biden's policy in the Caribbean has been a little bit slow. I can get away with that. He can, of course.
Okay, so I have 2 questions. One, have you been to the local Jolly Bee? Question. The next one is you mentioned that U.S. agency international development. The State Department has your own version of international development company. The difference between the two, or the collaboration between.
I should probably use all my drink tickets first. So the first question, so 3 years in the Philippines, I did not go to Jollibee. Jollibee is there for one of, let's just say, McDonald's. It's like their leading fast food place. It's the most popular fast food place in the Philippines. Love it. Like, But my team of 30+ workers, sweet spaghetti. Like, imagine making spaghetti and put it with sugar. I never tried it, but anyway, we love it. Chicken, hamburgers, stuff. And they have some in the US, New York, California.
There's one here.
Oh, wow.
Get your crowd order.
So, for USAID, so we are indeed different. Thanks, Mike, because, I think the State Department, and this makes a lot more sense for us, I guess this is online, sorry, they were kind of one, it makes some things easier, but USAID wants to maintain that economy, that's fine. Their development projects are, in general, far longer term and a far higher dollar value than anything we did with State Department. We are, this is very development agency, so we do the funding and state investment development type stuff. It's kind of peanuts compared to what they have, and they're for different purposes. And USAID, particularly in time of disasters, the humanitarian response is incredible work. And Indonesia, we have USAID there. We have in the Philippines, which has mudslides and typhoons and volcanoes. Oh my! But so AID, much bigger projects, much and generally longer term than what we do with the state. The process for entering AID is different. But in terms of collaboration, we work with them all the time because USAID, regardless of where the funding comes from, the American people do a project in a foreign country. If a tree falls and no one hears it, also we want to make sure that people know that we have provided humanitarian assistance after the hurricane, or if we've given them vaccines. And so they are a truly close partner because they're doing the work, and then we need to amplify from the American story.
I will add to that. The U.S. ambassador is the head of all agencies. Even DOD. I mean, you get to have Washington National. I was their boss. So that's interesting. So USAID, the ambassador ECN, right to evaluation, FBI, everybody. Congress, 24 agencies. So, I mean, yeah, State Department does do the work. It's an art. Sure.
I do, I just wanted to point out, we always say that young people come in. The cutoff age for entering is 59. Right? If anyone's interested, just like, well, I'm past 25.
My entering class in 2003, we were 90 so people. There were probably a half dozen who were on their third career, so maybe even something more. That in most cases, they've done, let's say, the military service and in the private sector and the life of the government or society. That's that third career, and into the foreign service.
They've done NGOs stuff,
That's right.
physicians, musicians,
Lawyers,
lawyers, all kinds of people.
ex-military guys. What's cool about the State Department, we have, ex-Marine security guards and ex-colonels. Both coming in equal.
Right.
How do we amplify the voice of all of the DOD has such a large budget to have a military. Now we'll stop not the day. And really would like to decrease the military, increase the issues of gun. And so really find that balance.
We talked a little bit at the beginning, but for us in the State Department, I just think it's a cultural shift that we have to take. It sees the Hill as an ally, not necessarily. I was supposed to say, we don't see the Hill, the institution doesn't see the Hill as an adversary, but we usually only engage with the Hill when they call on us to ask questions. And so we need to find a better model, a better mechanism for telling our story on the Hill. One of the things you might not know exist on the Hill is sometimes there are friendship caucuses. There's like a U.S.-Japan friendship caucus. Congressional representative Joaquin Castro is one of the co-chairs of that commission. And so when there were those affinity commissions on the Hill, sometimes it's another way to get in good stories about what the State Department is doing with soft power overseas, because you get congressional members particularly interested in country A or country B. Steve was around for a long time, we never saw that equation. So I know how many people saw it in my career, but just my own inclination is we've got to do better with the Hill. I'll say there were some skeptics on the Hill. Senator Rand Paul, I remember one of the things the State Department did was they were trying to get creative about how to get Indians and Pakistanis to engage with each other. Because we don't want war. We want terrorism in Kashmir, and so if India and Pakistan get along better, that's a good thing for them. And so for whatever the investment was, probably $100,000, $50,000, there was an NGO called Make Chai Not War, of Pakistani American and Indian American comedians. And the idea was to send them over and try to get Indian and Pakistani audiences to come together in a non-confrontational, easy way. It didn't solve the India-Pakistan conflict. It wasn't really, it couldn't. And that's one of those that Senator Paul likes to point out and say, I want to send comedians, that's what the State Department does, and it wasn't the whole story, right? I mean, a little bit of money, some creativity, you can actually do some pretty amazing things. It's just one example that shows some of the things that we try and do. They're not always going to work, but they do use them as arrows and improvements.
Yeah, we had tremendous problem. That we stopped a couple of years ago. Called Seeds of Peace in Israel. We have Israeli kids and Palestinian kids come to the States in summer camp. Some of them have made incredible connections. But here's a statistic I always used to throw around. There are more musicians in the Department of Defense, in bands and orchestras, than there are foreign service officers around the world. I mean, that's a pretty awesome statistic. It kind of shows what priorities are.
We always do this for like DoD budgets.
If only. I mean, I had a $1.2 billion budget. Started playing Columbia. And ironically, the largest chunk of it was foreign military sales for the Colombians to buy Black Hawk helicopters. So even though the State Department had a $1.3 billion budget to play Columbia, we spent most of it buying helicopters.
Interested in telling us a little bit about the presentation.
My take on what?
The presidential visa.
Well, I mean, I spoke about it. At nauseam. I don't buy the official version. I originally did because the guy who made the announcement was Leon Charles, the director of the guy that I knew from the old days, who I thought was a good guy. But his story doesn't hold up. The story doesn't hold up about the Colombian mercenaries. How come there was no one from the presidential guard injured or killed? How come these hotshot mercenaries didn't have an escape route and got captured 2 blocks away from the assassination like that? How come the head of the presidential guard ran away and he was trying to get a plane overseas? How come there's so many of them? Well, I think when the truth comes out, I mean, it was a reality. When the first White Minister said, we back the present Prime Minister, and that didn't make sense to me because they captured a lot of people. And now today, now they're going with the other Prime Minister. So it's extremely confusing. The Haitian people are the most longest suffering people in the West. It's tragic. The violence, the constant turnover, the natural disasters, just and yet they go on with an incredible amount of pride and a sense of who they are. It gets in the blood. The people at the U.S. Embassy in Philippines, they both served there multiple kids. I did 2 kids, 2 years apart. I was the first guy to shake Aristide's hand. I was the last guy to shake his hand when I got on 2 weeks. The irony was not lost neither on him nor on me.
I mean, feel really proud of you for being American and the fact that, I know you're doing us proud as Americans here, and I know you're doing us proud on toTokyo. So congratulations to both of y'all. What is your one tip though to pass the FSL exam? Or I'm sorry, to get past the oral assessment? I have my PS and IR, actually going for my MA in IR at St. Mary's, so I just really want to get through, but what would you say is the number one thing to do?
So when I took an oral exam back at this crazy federal building in Dallas, there were three parts to it. There was so it's changed just a little. There used to be a writing exercise, a timed writing exercise. I don't think we do that anymore as part of the oral. That's part of the
It's really, yeah.
So back then it was like you would get like a paragraph about a situation in the embassy, and you had to come to a decision and you type it out, not making typos, et cetera, next time. Then there was an interview portion where it was like good cop, bad cop, at least when I did it, and asking about your life experiences and stuff. And one guy was a normal guy, and the other guy just looked like he couldn't be more bored. Now, I said, yeah, I worked through that. And it hasn't changed. The big part of it is this negotiating exercise. I mean, Matt, you go into this room with like 5 other test takers, and I did it. We were a group of 6. And there were 6 seats at the table, and each one has a closed binder. And you're given like minimal instructions, and you have to read to the binder, and come to find out, you're a group of the embassy who has to make a decision about how the budget is spent. And you come to find out that each of the 6 of you has a different project that you're supposed to advocate for. But they tell you, the proctor's telling you, they say, at the end, whatever projects you decide to do, you gotta have a budget. If you don't come up with a budget, you'll fail. And it was like, gosh, that's not bad. And so it's time, and then they don't give you any instructions. You have time to read, they give you instructions, you read the budget, and then they just say, go. And there's a proctor in each of the 4 corners of the room with a clipboard. And you just sit there and you say, well, what? There's no instruction, but what happens next? And then you just have to kind of, okay, we have to come to the budget. Well, I have an education program. Oh, I have like a whatever program. And the way I thought about this dynamic was in my group, there was one person who didn't say anything the entire time. She might have been like the most brilliant person on the planet, but didn't say a word. And I thought, that's probably not where I need to be. And then there was a guy who was fresh out of college, 22-year-old undergrad, I think it's undergrad, but the winning meant advocating to the death for his proposal. Just being sort of obstinate, contrarian. I volunteered to be like a reporter, so we didn't have to write down the budget, and somebody else's timekeeper. And just thought, all right, well, I've got 6 people, and I've got one who's saying nothing, one who won't shut up, and is like really bullheaded. Let me be one of those 4, and try of those 4, be the best one of those 4, and to contribute in a meaningful way. It sounds smart, I don't know, but to be constructive, and took on the role of the scribe. I mean, you're in like an embassy meeting, somebody who's the scribe, that's a real thing. And if you don't come up with your budget numbers, budgets are run by timelines, so it's a real thing. If you look at the proposal submitted, you don't have time. Treasury is keeping that money, and so I would just say, don't be wallflower, don't be bullheaded, just try and be intelligent and fill whatever you can. Advocate for what you can, but you're going to concede, make like strategic concessions. That's really what it is. We can collaborate on this. Yeah. Not one of those. That is exactly the process. I found that you have to defend these things that you're your proposal. But then you have to use common sense. If it's something like saving lives, that's worth arguing for. But if it's like drinking tea with movie stars, so you've got to find that happy medium. You have to analyze what is the position you give it, and not be and not be the wallflower that is saying, "Oh, you got to be reasonable," and we want to see you get your personal skills. We want to see how you make your case, how you get. And those 4 guys in the corner, believe me, they're taking cold in this house.
I heard someone in the Foreign Service officers speak one time. And he said that you should be rotated back to the United States every so often. And the reason for that is so you do not become identified with the country. In other words, if you're
Going native is what they call it.
exactly, if you're in Japan for 3 years, then you start looking at the Japanese point of view than the American. You have to watch out for this.
So a couple parts to that. Yes, our assignments, it's rule of thumb, 3-year assignments. So you go to a place, you spend your first year figuring out what you're supposed to do, your second year actually doing it, and your third year thinking about what you're doing next. And so 3-year assignments, and conventional wisdom is to avoid clientitis, prevent you from seeing things through the lens or the eyes of the host country, because we're representing America overseas. Other foreign services do things from other countries, do things much differently. The Philippines is an example. Their assignments are 6 years. When I first heard that, I was like, oh my, 6 years. There are pros and cons to that. Like the Russians usually have longer assignments than we do, and they really embed people. They use embed purposely, they embed people in those places. I would say maybe where the rub comes on shorter assignments is probably the language. We have a training center that's outside of Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia, and some assignments you get language training for. You got French, you got Indonesian, I have Japanese. If you spend 6 months to 9 months learning the language, you just do it for 3 years. Some of us get pretty good at it, but if you do it for 5 years, maybe not going to part. But the way that the system runs is that whatever marginal extra benefit, 2 more years in a foreign language doesn't outweigh this idea. We're representing America. We're going to make sure we represent America. What I would say is there's no rule we come back to Washington.
Yeah, I spent 35 years in service. You know how many years I was in Washington? 2. So I spent 33 years overseas in 2 years. And they were the 2 worst years of my life.
To say the heart, we use this term hardship tour. Our biggest hardship tour is Belgium. But the ambassador's career is amazing because there's no rule you have to come back to Washington. And so the conventional wisdom is that every 3rd tour or so you come back to Washington, because if you're out in the field too long, you forget who you are. You've got a bid on our assignments. The fact that you became an ambassador having just done 2 years in Washington is extremely unique, and this speaks to your qualities.
Yeah, I took jobs and all that's one.
Or that.
Do we have any final question? Let's go all the way in the back.
Is any one of them more?
Great question. As a public diplomacy officer, I hope that's the right one. But I'll say the traditional notion of a diplomat, like, I think if you were to ask people in the 60s, 70s, what does a diplomat do? People would think about the political and economic cones. And those cones, I don't know why they're called cones, it's just the way we call them. You're engaged, you're reporting back to Washington what's going on, you're providing that context, you're really meeting with the movers and shakers, and they're really policy focused. I have at times as a public diplomacy officer called political and economic officers problem admirers. They're in public diplomacy, we're problem solvers. I'm not sure if my political econ colleagues would agree, but in the past, because they were the ones who worked on policy the most, they were the most likely to become ambassadors. There's been a greater shift over the past, let's say, 15 years that non-political economic officers be more involved in making the policy, not just executing the policy, as a way to get to those higher leadership positions. So I would say for public diplomacy over the past 10 years, more have become ambassadors. But when becoming an ambassador, it's a real crapshoot. Like, you really can't plan for that. It's just put on, you get dressed every day, you go and do your best, and you see how it works out in the end, because you don't really apply for those jobs. So they get it that much. You get like, hey, I'm going to hate you. But that's a good question. So it's changed over time. More management, consular, and public diplomacy folks in those positions.
Even AIP.
Yeah, USAID, there are USAID ambassadors.
All right. Well, let's hear it for Ambassador Moreno. We can stay until 9 and have one of the joint companies, Cecilia Herrera and Ambassador Moreno, just on a rock. So I want to recognize Cecilia also, who's worked abroad and also joint companies. So thank you all for being here. I want to also recognize new members. I know when we were promoting this event, we're trying to get people from new and new members. How many new members do we have? New members, the rest of you are renewed and current. Thank you so much for support. they're going to stay for a little bit, yeah. If you guys want to have any other questions, thank you so much to your family for letting us borrow they're only here for a few weeks, and you're sharing them with us. So thank you for allowing us to have them. So appreciate it, and best wishes to you. We have some party thank yous to you and Master Moreno as well. We can't do this kind of programming without your support. Of course, it takes a lot of time and resources to make this happen, and we appreciate your support. Anna, who you met earlier at check-in, she can sign you up if you want to learn more about becoming involved on committees, on the board, and also making a gift also that is significant to you. She's got a setup there for you to allow you to do that. So thank you again. I also want to point out we have a few in-person programs coming up. One I'll mention because our collaborative partners here from Musical Bridges, we're going to do an amazing program with an Iranian author who will zoom in from Washington, D.C., but we'll have it at the Roosevelt Library in collaboration with Musical Bridges, and Sudale is helping us with that. So thank you. You all appreciate it. We will see you. Check your emails for the next event, and thank you all for being here.
Not yet, not yet. For more minutes.